I'm about to tell you some things in rapid succession. I'd be willing to bet that most of you believe you already know what I'm about to tell you. That you will say, I already knew that. It was nothing new. And that's probably true, that you know it. The question isn't, do you know it? The question is, do you use it and do you do it? And the truth is, if you know something and you don't do it, it's much worse than not knowing it and not doing it. Because if you don't know it, you'll at least be open to trying it or using it or practicing it. When I say this is a hard way to make an easy living, I say to you that there are some very simple things that you need to do, but I don't see people doing them. Now, by the way, I'm not mad. I'm grateful because it's how I make a living. I see some very simple things. I think they're hard, but I think they're simple. Now listen, if I learned anything in life, because I wasn't learning about hair, if anything is simple and it is hard, the key element becomes discipline. And today we're going to talk about the disciplines of how you can convince people to do what you want, and better, to have them think it was their idea to do it so that they can own it. It isn't about pressure. It's about selling with integrity. It's about helping somebody get what they want, even though they don't want insurance, and have them glad that they met you. Now, I've made a comment. I've made a comment that I think most of you say, you know it. Here's what I'm going to tell you, whether you like this one or not. When you walk out of this room today, not only will you believe you knew all these things, and you're going to hear me say them, I'm going to tell you that when you walk out the door, you won't be able to do them. So you knew them when you walked in, you're going to hear me do them, and you still won't be able to do them. That's pretty brash. Let me tell you how sure I am of myself. I have a $100 bill here. And before we're done, I'm going to bring some of you up here to compete to see if you can do what we spoke about. If you can do it, you can win the $100. Let me tell you how sure I am of myself. You don't have to put up anything. I will put up $100 of mine against nothing of yours just to prove that you won't be able to do it. And there's only 3 or 4 simple things that you have to remember. So let's look at the card for a minute. And if we say to ourselves, what are the key elements? Trust, credibility, rapport, and urgency. What is trust? Because I think trust is really misunderstood. Trust is when somebody believes that you will tell the truth. Do you all have copies of these cards? Anyone not have one? You don't have one? I know we have some others floating around someplace. Trust is when somebody believes that you will tell the truth at the risk of losing their business. Trust means that they will answer every single one of your questions honestly because they believe you won't hurt them with it. If you ask people who their current carrier is and they're reluctant to tell you, then they don't trust you yet. If you want to ask someone about their other financial situations and the rest of how they spend their money or their concerns about their life and they won't tell you, it's because they don't trust you yet. And the whole goal here, how many of you like to play cards? Put your hands up. Okay, I'm going to now give you a secret. This isn't part of what I was paid to do today. This is like a little extra. Value added? You're like, that's a buzzword now. Okay. Here's the value added. Here's how you win at cards all the time. I'm going to give you the secret. You ready? You're going to like this one. It's how you win almost all the time. Convince the other person, get the other person to show you their hand. You like that one? You think it'll work? Well, but wait a minute. You have the same situation because you walk into somebody and they're holding a hand. If they don't show you the hand, it's very difficult for you, so you have to kind of give some generic rote presentation about the product that you're trying to sell them and why it benefits them, but it's all kind of generic stuff. None of it's really personal to them. None of it's specific to them because you don't know enough about them to do that. So they have to trust you. They have to get to a point where they say, here's the hand I'm holding. Just don't hurt me. This is where integrity comes in, because the question is when somebody lets you know what they're like, will you take advantage of them? Will you take advantage of them? Because we have all had that happen to them. So that's trust. What is credibility? Now, people think these are the same. They're not. They're not the same in Webster's, and they're not the same for you and me. Credibility is the person's belief that you actually know what you're talking about. So I may trust you, but still think you're an idiot. I may think you know what you're talking about, but not trust you. Do you have a friend that if you told them something very personal, everyone down at Starbucks would know about it the next day? Or, everybody in your group or whatever your thing is, that they would tell other people about it, even though it might have been said in confidence? So credibility is the belief that you actually know what you're talking about. Now listen, I didn't come here to be your friend. I hope we can like each other, but I didn't come here to be liked today. I came here to tell you the truth. The average person who buys insurance has some problems with their life insurance people because they talk too much in insurance language. You're not attorneys. You're not going to get away with it. And so if you want to sell them a lot of insurance, the thing you have to do is speak to them in a language that they understand and not try to show off. And no offense to you, I know it's everyone that's not here today, so maybe you know someone like this. The tendency for a lot of people who have the technical expertise you have is to show off. Now, don't get me wrong. I can be accused of being a show-off. I've been one most of my life. I still fall into the trap. When you do something, you want to show it off, don't you? When you do something well, you're proud of what you do. So some of you have spent your entire life learning about these things, and you make the mistake sometimes of trying to impress somebody with how much you know, and all you're doing is shutting them down. Now, what is rapport? Now, how many of you know Jeffrey Gitomer? You know Gitomer? Got any of his books, the little red book of Selling Black? Gitomer and I have been buddies for years, and we email all the time. And actually, he's a pretty gruff guy. I come across, and we're both real softies. And we talk about the first note I got the night my mom died was from Jeffrey Gitomer. One night, he was out somewhere. I think he was in Las Vegas, and I was sitting in Washington, D.C., and we were emailing pictures of Scheid Park in Philadelphia, where we both grew up in Philadelphia, watching the Phillies, a terrible team, and in the middle of the night doing this. Anyway, I love Gitomer, and I'm telling you this because we debate this issue all the time. Gitomer will tell you something that I believe is not true. I call it a falsism, and unfortunately, I think some of you believe it. He says that people only buy from people they like. I submit to you, you do business every day with people you don't particularly like. I submit you buy from people you trust, and we confuse the two. Like meaning trust. How many of you have a friend that you would never buy anything from? And how many of you have somebody you trust that you would never bring over to your house for dinner? So that's my argument with Gitomer. See, defined like is about attraction. It's a law of attraction. You like someone. Trust is all about character. It's reliance on character. It has nothing to do with liking you. How many of you know William Bennett, Bill Bennett, the accountant, the CPA out on Shelbyville Road? He is the best accountant I have ever had. The best bar none that I have ever had. He brings me to, he's been my accountant for about 14 years. He's a specialist in small businesses like mine. I've sent Bill 6 clients. 6! I've never asked for anything. I don't take referral fees. So I'm very clear, I don't want your money. His assistant, she thinks she's so cute. She says to me, he just takes it off your bill. I said, tell him to stop doing that. I don't take referral fees. Anyway, Bill Bennett, wonderful man. I trust him immensely. There's nothing about my life he doesn't know. I sit with him. He's like watching a bowl of plain yogurt. You ask him a question, he's tapping his pencil, he's looking around the room. He's actually thinking, I guess, about the answer. And, I'm sitting there going, come on, Bill, I got places to go, things to do, you want to get back to me. And very deadpan when he talks. He's actually given me over the 14, 15 years, he's probably said a couple of funny things to me. They're little jokes. It took me like 5 minutes to understand that it was supposed to be funny. So you know the kind of person I'm talking about. Now, I would tell you this. I put that trust, I've never invited him to lunch. I've never gone to lunch with him. I've never invited him to one of my parties. My friends would not really like them. My friends are very different from that. And, my friends are probably more like you. So got to be a little nuts to be an insurance agent, because if you take what happens to you seriously, you have to go home and kill yourself. So this is what most of my friends, they're not real serious people. Bill's a pretty serious guy. Every time I go over there, he puts on his jacket. I could be showing up someday with a 2-day beard, a baseball cap, and a pair of shorts. He puts on his coat and tie for when I walk in, because that's what he does. Well, why am I telling you the story? It sounds like I'm bashing Bill Bennett, doesn't it? I want you to listen to me closely. I've sent him 6 clients that pay him on time. I've brought him a lot of business over the years. He's handling my mother's estate. I got him to be the trustee as well as handling my mother's estate. And it occurred to me, last time I told this story, he's never invited me to lunch. He's never invited me to his home. He's never taken me out, never invited me to his Christmas party. I don't know if he has one. I'll bet when his people say, man, that is one weird dude, he probably says to them, you know what? He runs a good business. He takes care of his employees. He pays his taxes. He's honest, and he makes a hell of a profit. My kind of client. It has nothing to do with being his friend. He probably doesn't want me as his. I'd love to be a little fly on the wall in his office. I'm sure he doesn't want me as his friend either. See, and so he and I, for the last 13, 14 years, have blissfully done all this business with each other, and we've never tried to be friends with each other, I'm telling you. If you're entering a client's business trying to be their friend, you are making a mistake, because if they think you're trying to be your friend, they are going to X you out. They have enough friends. I don't need any more friends. I don't get to see my friends enough, my family enough. In the end, this is really about trust. Does that mean you shouldn't be friendly? Do not confuse being friendly and easy to do business with trying to be somebody's buddy. Now, and if you see that, get him or somewhere around, tell him I said so. What's the last one? Urgency. Now, this one's pretty simple. The longer someone takes to make a decision, the more likely that answer is to be no. And that's why this gentleman that wrote the article in here about the emotions is important, because in the end, people don't understand what we're selling. And so if you don't ask, like that gentleman back there said, you had to ask for the business. If you don't ask for the business and compel them to make a decision. See, this is where closing is misunderstood. People think closing is just asking for the order and getting them to say yes. It's not really what it's about. I'm going to promise you, what it's really about is getting the person to make a decision. If they were going to make a decision while I'm there, I don't care if it's yes or no, because if I can make a decision while I'm there, it's more likely to be yes on that day than any day. Do you believe that? Okay, now I'm not speaking for 100% of the sales calls you make, but when I'm with a prospect, when I'm with a buyer, the best days, percentage-wise, of getting their business is on the day that I am with them. So if I can get them to make a decision, whether it's yes or no, and by the way, I will accept their no as graciously as I'll accept their yes. If I can get them to make a decision. Not only that, if I can get them to make a decision, instead of making all the stupid calls I'm going to make to them to show what a professional follow-up I can do and waste my time. What if the answer is no and they didn't tell me it was no? They just wanted to be nice to me because I was their friend. Well, we're going to think about it a little bit. We're going to look at some other policies. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And in the end, what happens? How many of you read the greatest book on selling I've ever read? It's called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. How many of you read the book? Raise your hands high. Let me tell you, go out and buy the book. If you can't find it, I have some. You can have it for $10. Call my office. I'm listed in the book, 254-2345. Greatest book I ever read on selling, written by Frank Betcher, God rest his soul. Frank Betcher was an insurance salesperson from Philadelphia. And my favorite story in the book is a guy who is selling his business, and he's got to buy Key Man Insurance. So Betcher takes the train, the 90-minute train from Philadelphia to New York. He's sitting in the guy's office, and after he walks in to sit down, he introduces himself. The guy says to Betcher, look, he was referred, by the way, so it was a referral. He said, look, I agreed to see you, because such and such said you were a smart guy. He said, but truthfully, this is going to be a waste of your time. He said, I've already got 4 quotes on this Key Man Insurance. 4 quotes. He said, one of the guys I know personally from my neighborhood, the other guy I play golf with. Betcher said, well, you're probably right, but I took a 90-minute train ride. Since we set aside time, let me just ask you a couple of questions before I leave. And so he begins to ask him some questions about what he wanted to do, et cetera. And then he finally said, now, I see, if you have these 4 quotes sitting on your desk, how come you haven't acted on any of them? What do you think the answer was? I want to see which one of them is the best deal. He said, well, that makes a lot of sense. Here's your problem. In order to determine which one of those is the best deal, you'd have to be an actuary. That takes 7 years. He said, you know what? You could be right. I may have wasted my time. I thought you really wanted to sell your business. Clearly to me, this not selling your business isn't that important to you. The guy stands up at his desk. He says, what are you talking about? Selling this business is the most important thing in my life right now. This is the best deal I'm ever going to get. And Betcher says to him, If something happened to you tomorrow, the buyer is telling you they won't buy the business without you. So if you don't have the insurance, you don't have a deal, and now what do you have? He said, it would seem to me that somebody that really wanted to sell their business, someone that had the deal of a lifetime sitting in front of them, would do something simple and inexpensive and something that was easy. They would go get themselves insured to make sure that nothing happened to them when they were crossing the street tonight. Dead silence in a room. Guy turns away from him and stares out the window because he has been told the truth. He says to Betcher, he turns around and he says, let's get something to eat. And that's what a lot of us do when we're nervous and we're upset. He says to Betcher, let's get something to eat. Grabs his hat, they go out to lunch. Betcher takes the papers out of his pocket. He puts them down. The guy is ready to sign the papers to become Betcher's client. And as he puts the pen down, he sits up and he looks at Betcher and he says, hey, what company do you represent? What's the point of the story? If you get somebody to show you their hand, if people trust you, if people think you're credible, Betcher never even talked about himself, didn't even tell them the name of his company. Now you might be thinking, oh, he was lucky. That's an obtuse rule. Listen, I do sales presentations for people all the time in all kinds of businesses, and when I finish making a presentation about a product that I don't really know a lot about, someone usually looks at me and says, you were lucky. That's better than saying, I wish I could do that as well as you. See, I don't know a lot about the products. I don't know a lot about the services, but this is the part I do know, and this is the arena you're in. Now listen, I can't tell you the name of it, but I have a client in the health insurance business, has 3,000 agents. 3,000 agents. We increased, or let's start with this, we decreased the cost per acquiring a new health insurance policy by more than half. And I did it in 90 days with terrible salespeople. Well, not terrible, but they weren't really accomplished salespeople. Now, how did we do it? Well, we re-scripted them for one. We changed the message that they were using. These are people who advertise on television. We changed the message they were using, and they advertised on the internet. Calls are coming, and they were doing cold calling as well, buying specialized lists and cold calling. So we were taking the calls, we re-scripted all the people, and we did much better. But what do you think? I'm talking here about urgency. What do you think was the number one thing I changed that was life-changing to them? Raise your hand. What do you think it was? We started a hot feed. And so simply after we had the person on the phone for a few minutes and we talked to them about their situation, we got them on the phone with an agent when? Immediately. And the agent would